Warriors v West Tigers, Friday 6 p.m, Go Media Stadium. Warriors team news. Roger Tuivasa-Sheck moves to the wing, from the wing to fullback to cover Tuapiki. Kossi comes onto the wing. Graham Tafua comes into centre with Pompey out with a knee injury. West Tigers team news. Dewey is being rested. Fainu takes over the suspended Aiden Caesar at halfback. Coruscant returns from a calf injury. Papali'i returns from an ankle injury. Seyfarth returns from concussion on the bench. Clemmer replaces Bolle, and Porter comes in to join Bateman. Look, I guess from the West Tigers' perspective, Dewey being rested is strange. I'd have to do some more research on that, because if he has some tightness in certain areas of his bodies, and that's where they're going, look, you're not necessarily injured, but you've got some tightness, so there's no point. The season's already over. There's no point you injuring yourself. But rested is bizarre to me, because the last thing this bloke needs is to be rested. He's barely played footy in forever. And you think Adam Dewey is the kind of bloke that's sitting there going, oh, yeah, no worries, I want to be rested. Adam Dewey's an ultimate competitor. He wants to be out there every second of the match. So I'm really interested to see what's going on there. Fainu takes over for suspended Aiden Caesar. Look, it's going to be really interesting to see how the combination between Fainu and Galvin blossoms, because ironically, Fainu, well, probably Sullivan was ahead of him, but it probably went Sullivan, Fainu, and then Galvin at the start of this season. And now, with the signing of Jerome Luai, it really is looking like Jerome Luai, Galvin will be the halves next year. And so it leaves a guy like Fainu, who is still extremely young, but it leaves him in a bit of limbo. He was brought across from the Manly Seagulls. He's got an incredible future in the game. He actually made the New South Wales under-19s side last year. And so it's going to be interesting to see how they handle that, because you need balance and you need depth in your half spot. But when you've got a guy as good as him, hopefully he gets the right development and treatment so that he at the very least, he's becoming the best player he can be. But let's say the Tigers continue to struggle. Players like him usually go, well, I'd rather go to another club and be in reserve grade but becoming the best version of myself if the Tigers are still struggling. In regards to this matchup, just a really important matchup for the Warriors. I know disappointing loss last week because of the kicking. I get that. There were other opportunities for them to win the game, but they'll look at that game and just go, geez, we almost did everything right. Warriors, I've spoken about this earlier in the week, but they're this team where the facts would suggest that this is the same old Warriors. They've gone from a really good year to a really poor year. But when I watch them play, they don't look like the same old Warriors. They do look like they've got a good foundation. They do look like they're building into the future. They have been decimated by injury, so there is that excuse for sure. But I think that for the rest of the year, they probably aren't going to play finals footy. So their main focus needs to be, we need to prove to ourselves that this isn't the same old Warriors. We need to prove to ourselves that although this is a disappointing season, that we can build something, we can show a foundation heading into next year, because they got some of the best young forwards in the competition. I cannot express enough how exciting the next generation is for the Warriors. But it's just a matter of, I wouldn't necessarily say they're playing for pride. It's more about playing for a foundation. It's playing to set standards for the next generation to take up that mantle as a Warriors team. The West Tigers, look, it's just been a disastrous year, to be honest. There's no other way to kind of slice it. The whole Bateman thing is bizarre. I don't understand it. Him being, I guess, released to play the rest of the year in the Super League, but he can come back next year to finish out his contract. That would suggest to me that they're trying to almost offload in hopes that when he goes over there, he can pick up another contract, because in no world does that benefit the West Tigers if they are planning to keep him and they want to keep him. The only thing that does benefit is if he goes to the Super League, plays really well, and someone goes, you know what, we'll offer you a contract here in the Super League. But I'm picking the Warriors in this game. I think they'll be too strong. I think the West Tigers will put up a fight, but I just think the Warriors are going to be too strong this time around. We're going to head to a break. After the break, we've got Eels versus the Storm. We've got the Broncos versus Bulldogs. We've got the Cowboys versus the Sharks. Injury, Cam Munster is named in the reserves as he closes in on a return from injury. Jeez. With all the news and everything going on about the Eels, it's a tough week to face the Storm, because they looked unbelievable last week. For quite a while now. I've always had them as premiership contenders this season, but I've had my doubts about their defence, the Storm. I've watched them and I've just said, look, this is very unstorm-like how easily they're leaking points this season. But after last weekend, I have no more doubts. They are absolutely heavyweights in this race for a 2024 premiership. And the way they handled the Roosters, I'm just shocked. I'm genuinely shocked. I looked at that Roosters forward pack and just said there's no team that can handle them. Even the Penrith Panthers, I thought, and when I say can't handle them, I don't mean they can't beat them. I just mean that any team that plays them, there's going to be long periods where they are going to be on the back foot because the Roosters, when they get rolling, are just impossible to stop. How wrong I was. The Melbourne Storm completely controlled that game. It was a dominant win, and the Roosters didn't look anywhere near their dominant self. And I think that one of the big key factors with the Roosters is that other teams, other top-tier teams, when their forwards aren't going forward and they're getting dominated with line speed from the opposition, usually they've got a half with a really long boot, and they just gets them out of trouble. And that's what's been so impressive about Hughes' kicking game. It's improved so much. Munster has a relatively long boot as well, but not necessarily the biggest. But when you look at the Roosters, that's, I guess, one big question I have is that do they need to find someone with a big boot in the halves? Because Sam Walker's short kicking game is probably the best in the competition, form-wise anyway. It's absolutely incredible. Now, the argument against that is okay, look, for where they lack in a long boot, they have the forward pack. And so maybe it's just been a big Origin series for the Roosters at the moment, and they'll bounce back because I don't think very often they find themselves in a position where they're getting dominated by another forward pack. They very rarely do. So maybe Robinson is just banking on the fact that, look, okay, we don't have the longest kicker. We just rely on our forward pack to always get the extra, every set, instead of us getting 40 metres, let's say that 40 metres is the average across the NRL. Our forward pack is so dominant, we get 47, 48 metres, and that's why we don't need a longer kicker. So maybe that's his tactic. But last week, the Storm were incredible. Now, onto the Eels v. the Storm. Look, the Eels at the moment, it's really, for the rest of the season, you're auditioning for a contract. That's what it is. There's a new coach coming in, and he is going to be watching every second of every game so closely, and he'll be basically making his decision. And also, I think that even if you have a contract for another 2 to 3 years, we know how the game works these days. If a club wants you gone, you're gone. And so if you're a player at the Eels and you want to stay at the Eels, you are playing for your future, because Ryles will be coming in and saying, as I said, even if there's players with multiple years left, he will still be tapping them on the shoulder if he doesn't believe that they are a part of his plan going forward. So the Eels are playing for their future. The Storm, look, they're just looking to be dominant. It's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Just another win, building into finals footies. We aren't that far away now. All righty, let's get into a Broncos v Bulldogs. What a game. Saturday, 3 p.m, Suncorp. Fast track. I mean, it doesn't get much better than this. Saturday Arvo, Broncos v Bulldogs. Both teams, Bulldogs aren't playing for their season, but they're potentially playing for a top 4 spot. Who would have thought? It's absolutely amazing. The Broncos playing for their season. So this clash, honestly, is going to be incredible. Broncos team news. Selwyn Cobbo returns from a groin injury, pushing Oates to 18th man. Hetherington moves into the starting side in place of injured Brendan Piakora. Blake Moser joins the bench. Bulldogs team news. Lipoi Hopoi in for Chris Patola is the only change from the side that fell to the Cowboys last week. Now, this game for the Broncos, it's do or die. And that's a worrying thing for the Broncos heading into the rest of the year, is that every game is essentially do or die. And the good thing for Bulldogs fans is, if there is one style of footy that beats the Broncos, it's incredibly good defense that frustrates them. And so people, I've got Broncos winning this game, but people that think it's just going to be a walk in the park, if the Bulldogs that we know and we've gotten to be big fans of this year turn up with that incredibly strong, aggressive, just tough-nosed defense rocks up, they may frustrate the Broncos out of this contest. Even against the Knights, there was periods where the Broncos had 7 or 8 line breaks, and I think they'd only scored 6 to 10 points. And so and the Knights' defense, it's not that great this year, unfortunately. Whereas the Bulldogs, you would have to suggest that they defend better than the Knights. In that same scenario, the Broncos could have had 7 line breaks and no points. And if that happens, all of a sudden, they start chancing their hand even more. They get frustrated. And before you know it, there's 10 minutes to go. And the score is, 14-12 to the Bulldogs. That's how exciting this game is. That's if the Bulldogs that we know this year rock up with the second best defense in the competition, it's genuinely going to be the age-old battle. Out-and-out attack versus out-and-out defense. And it's going to be incredible. So, look, I've got the Broncos winning this one, but I think this is going to be a cracking match. And the Bulldogs, what can you say? What can you say? Like, what a turnaround from Serraldo. And just what raps you've got to give Serraldo. Even me, I've been, over the last few years, people stay patient with the Bulldogs. They've got some of the best young juniors coming through, and it's true, they do. But even it got points towards the end last year where I was sitting there going, geez, maybe Serraldo's defensive systems and everything he's trying to implement, maybe it just doesn't work as a head coach. But he stayed strong. He stayed strong. He did not waver from his vision, and he is being rewarded for it this year. Cleaned out the roster, got a roster that would respond to his vision, and he is getting rewarded for it this year. And the exciting thing for the Bulldogs is they're just getting started. They've barely got into the recruitment market over the next few years. They've barely got the next big juniors that they've got coming through. They've got guys like Hayward, that was the under-19-7 coming through. They've got a bunch of youngsters that won essentially all junior premierships over the last few years. I think last year was 3 of the 4. It is exciting times to be a Bulldogs fans, and it's just the beginning. It's just the beginning. We're going to head to a break. After the break, we've got Cowboys v Sharks. Welcome back to the Captain's Run, Cowboys v Sharks, Saturday, 5:30 p.m, Queensland Country Bank Stadium. What a game of two teams that, if you listen to the headlines, if you listen to even some of the fans, you'd be thinking they've had disappointing, disastrous seasons. And yet when you actually look at the results and where they both sit, they are well within firing range. Cowboys sit within the 18 games, but they've got 24 points. So right now, points-wise, if they had their bye, they would actually be sitting essentially in the top 4. Sharks, they are sitting in the top 4 and quite snug, actually. They're on 28 points compared to the Bulldogs' 24 points. And so you look at these two sides and you go, when you listen to the headlines, they've had a really poor year. We are in round 21 and they are both in firing range of the top 4. So, it's a genuine, this could be a 4-point turnaround this match. Whoever wins this match, it could decide whether they end up in the top 4 because they're so close on the ladder. In regards to team news of the Cowboys, Jackson Purdue joins the starting side after his try against the Bulldogs. Valentine Holmes, he moves to the wing. Murray Talangi named in the reserves as he closes in on a return from hamstring injury. Sharks team news, Liam Eason makes his NRL debut at fullback in place of Will Kennedy. Not related to Liam Neeson of Taken fame. Talakai returns on the bench after his suspension. Look, the Sharkies, yes, they're missing Nicho Hines, but they've really, really shown that they can get the job done without Hines. I mean, yes, it was the Tigers they played last week, and the week before, and the Tigers were terrible. I get that, but they also have gone down to Melbourne and beaten Melbourne without Nicho. And so it's almost just about business as usual, playing the Cowboys. Granted, the Cowboys are a very feared side, and when it all comes together, it's very tough to go with them. But I don't think the Sharkies should be heading up north being worried or, not filled with confidence because they've proven they can do it. In regards to the Cowboys, geez, haven't they turned a corner? There were times where they were on a 4-game winning streak, but when you actually watched them play, you were just geez, this is not like the Cowboys we know, and we know what they can be as a top 4 side. But they've sorted their defense out. That was the key. For a period there in the middle of the season, they were just lucky they had incredible attack because, honestly, any time someone got down their end, they would score literally off their first set down there. Their goal line defense or their ability to defend an error, it was just non-existent in the middle of the year. But they've seemed to have fixed that. And all of a sudden, you've got Cowboys and Sharkies heading into the end of the year, if they can keep on this trajectory, both teams that, you've got your heavyweights of your Penrith, your Storm, your Roosters as well, that almost kind of locked in to be heavyweights when it comes to the premiership. But I tell you what, if the trajectory of both of these sides continues on the up, you wouldn't want to play a Sharks side filled with confidence and getting Nico Hines back. Or you wouldn't want to play a Cowboys side where Taumalolo was hitting some great form again, and and the outside backs like Scotty Drinkwater are starting to really find their eye. Like this is a really, really big clash. Look, I'm going to go the Cowboys to get the job done just because they're at home. And although the Sharks have shown they can win without Nico, it still is I guess a big loss for them. And I just think the Cowboys just are really starting to find their groove. It wasn't an easy win against the Bulldogs. They really gave it to them up there, and they found a way to win. So I'm going to go the Cowboys, but I think both teams, I'd be very surprised if they don't find themselves in the top 8 by the end of the year. Now, on to the Roosters v. the Seagulls. Don't forget, we're here for Chemist Warehouse. Get discounted prescriptions and save more money at Chemist Warehouse. Roosters v. Seagulls. Oh, what a clash. What a clash. You've got a Rooster side looking to bounce back after last week, and you've got a Seagull side that is absolutely flying. And with Tom Trbojevic looking like he's finding 2021 form, all of a sudden, this Seagull side looks like a side that, every now and then he can upset a big dog, and it might have a few upsets or big wins, but I just don't know whether he'll be able to go all the way in a grand final with Tom Trbojevic now back to the form that he's at. You all of a sudden you ask yourself, what can this Manly Seagull side do? Because that's how good Tom Trbojevic is. And that's what we saw last weekend. Like, he was unstoppable. If he can stay injury-free, if they can stick to improvement, and it's not just Tom Trbojevic, Tom Talau, career best season. You've got Hopewadi, who was obviously injured. Lehigh Hopewadi, obviously injured, but he'll be back in a few weeks, playing incredibly well. You've got Garrick really warming to the centre position. You've got Saab, who's been great and just finishing, getting back to his best finishing ability. It really is looking like if DCE can just stay on the field with Tom Trbojevic, they could be a real dark horse of the top 8. Now to the Roosters, it's just really important they bounce back because they'd built so much confidence. And this time last year, I think they were sitting like 14th, and the fact that right now they're sitting 4th shows you how much improvement Trent Robinson has made. The question now remains is that next little step, because against Penrith and Storm in their last 20 matches, they've only won one match. And so that's the challenge for the Roosters going forward, is building enough confidence so when they get to finals footies, that's not in the back of their mind where they're going, oh, we actually haven't beaten these top-tier sides recently. And I think that the Roosters are they're a side that if you give them a sniff and they get almost like that alpha standover kind of vibe where they just feel like they're bullying you, you just can't rein them in. Like if the Roosters in the first 10 to 15 minutes feel like they've got you on the back foot and they're bullying you and they're dominating you, they're just an aggressive, in-your-face side. They're very hard to reel in. Whereas if you can just throw them off kilter a little bit, and that's what's going to be interesting with the Seagulls game plan. It's a very side-to-side game plan. They are more than willing to spread the ball coming out of their own end, and that sometimes can take the aggression out, the sting out of the game, where Roosters forwards, they'll be very rested in attack, but in defence, they'll almost feel like what do I do? It's almost like I'm so used to, pulling off big shots, being able to dominate the opposition with my defence, and I no longer have that outlet. It's almost like a confusing situation to be in, and that's where the Manly Seagulls could really pose a threat to nearly all of the top-tier sides because they play such a unique brand of footy that is side-to-side, and they're hitting the 3 in defenders, which 3 in defenders is your halves, obviously your 7 and your 6s, that the forwards almost don't really play a role in being able to dominate field position. So this is going to be a great clash, and I think it's going to be really important that Roosters' line speed is just really dynamic to almost cut the ball off before it gets to their edges. Because if you go back and you look at the 2 early line breaks that the Storm made last week, they were both on their 3 in defenders. The first one, I think, was on Sam Walker. The second one was on Keary. And the Seagulls would have obviously watched that. They would have identified that. Now, in regards to the Roosters, the really positive thing for them is you've got a Tedesco that didn't play game 2 or 3. he's almost not going to know what to do with all the energy he has this year. It's been so long since he hasn't had to play Origin. And when your captain and your leader has that much energy, that's only going to get trickled down. And so the Roosters, we watched last year, the last 2 years, the biggest Achilles heel for the Roosters is they got to finals footy and they didn't have 2 bites at the cherry. And they just had one game where they just lost by a point, or there was that crazy send-off game. And if they had got another crack at it, you would have thought that they would have made a deeper run into the finals. So right now they're sitting in the top 4, and they actually should be top 3 because they've got a game in hand. So they are in prime position to make a real run at this premiership. As I said, the only concern is that record, the last 20 games against the top-tier sides. Now, we're going to head to a break. After the break, we've got Dragons v Panthers, and then we've got Dolphins v Titans. Lomax and Hunt return from Origin duties, meaning Ravalawa and Marshke drop out. Fatala Mariner returns after missing Broncos game with back spasms. Leilua shifts to the bench. Panthers team news. Luai, Martin, Yeo, and To'o are back on deck after being rested last week. Edwards remains sidelined with an knee injury. I tell you what, it sucks that the Dragons are getting the Panthers with all those boys coming back. I think the Dragons have improved so much this season. I really do. But the fact that the Panthers last week didn't necessarily play their best footy, but they still managed to find a way to beat the Dolphins. And they're getting all these boys back, Luai, Martin, Yeo, and To'o. I think it's going to be a very hard task for the Dragons to get the job done. In regards to the Dragons, what an incredible season. I'll be the first to put my hand up and say I was not excited about the Dragons this year. I thought they were bottom for sure. I genuinely just couldn't see where they were going to get the spark from to make any movement up the ladder. I knew Flanagan was a great coach, and I thought long-term, 3 or 4 years, we would really see what he could do. But what he's done in such a short span of time, it's honestly incredible. And what I love about the Dragons now is, they've been really up and down. One game, they're incredible, and you're thinking, wow, they could make the top 8. And then the next game, you're like, geez, a really big loss. But what I love about them is they're exciting. The fact that Leilua, this is a forward pack that less than 12 months ago, really struggling to have any X factor. Really struggling to have any X factor. Now they've got so much X factor. Leilua is coming off the bench. It is amazing what they've achieved, and it just excites me. And I keep going back to Flano saying first year we want to make the 8, and then second year we want to be battling for a premiership. Honestly, I scoffed at it. I genuinely scoffed. I was like, that is just too short of a timeline. I guess who's laughing now? Who's laughing now? Because the Dragons, they are currently in 9th spot. Yes, I'm backing the Panthers to get the win here, but that doesn't mean that the Dragons haven't been incredible this year. They're on the same amount of points as the Bulldogs and the Dolphins, who are sitting 6th and 7th. It's an amazing season for the Dragons. And who knows? Maybe we get the Dragons that rock up that are top tier, that just somehow put together their best footy, and that really could give the Panthers some worries. But I think the Panthers, this is the part of the season where they just go, boop, we're going up a gear, and it gets scary, real scary. Same thing happened last year where they just went, boom, we're going up a gear, and it became scary to watch. So, I'm very, very excited to see how this game pans out, but I do think the Panthers get the job done. Dolphins v Titans, Sunday 4 p.m, Suncorp Stadium. Bennett goes with the same 17 that took the Panthers on the Golden Point last weekend. Titans team news, Des Hasler sticks with the same 17 that lost the Seagulls last weekend. The Dolphins, who would have thought as well? Second year of existence, currently sitting 7th. I've spoken about it so much, but the fact that Katoa could go down to Penrith and essentially outplay Cleary. Now, granted, he's nowhere near Cleary in regards to resume and achievements, all that kind of stuff. But in this just one-off game, he had the audacity and the confidence to essentially outplay Cleary for most of the match until when it mattered, which was obviously the field goal, and that's where Cleary's experience came in, is amazing. The future is so bright for Katoa. It is so bright for the Dolphins, the fact that they've got him locked up. And they are they're everyone's favourite second team. They play with so much grit and determination. Every single week when you think, okay, this will be the week where all the injuries kind of affect them, it doesn't. against the Titans. Look, I'm going to back the Dolphins here. I'm going to back the Dolphins. The Titans, for me, they're similar-ish to the Warriors, where when you look at the facts, when Holbrook got sacked, they were 9th. They are now sitting 15th. It's a tough. I'm finding it really hard to square away the facts and the fact that when you watch them, they do look like changes have been made, and the fact that Desi Hasler, we know how good he is. And so it's really two camps of what you believe. Do you believe that Desi Hasler is making a lot of changes in terms of systems, in terms of the way they train, and we might see a Bulldogs-ish resurgence next year? And we're almost watching the Bulldogs of last year where they just completely fell off a cliff, but then we saw the benefits of what they've put together in 2025 the next year. Or are we being hoodwinked by the great Desi Hasler's mystique and his history and the fact that he's won comps and been such a good coach? Because that's where I'm really finding it hard to square away. They're currently sitting 15th. Like, this is at the start of the year, the Titans were my dark horse. Like, the Titans, when I looked at this young forward pack, I was like, this reminds me of the Broncos a couple of years ago. And granted, the Broncos have been really disappointing this year too. But, like, we're talking about Fafita, Fodawaker. Palacia was outstanding at the Broncos. He hasn't really kicked on. You know, he's had a few injuries, so that hasn't helped as well. Like, they had Beau Fermor, who was basically on the cusp of Origin as well. Kieran Foran leading them around. Brimson, Campbell, like, their outside backs were good. Philip Sammy on the cusp of Origin as well. So I'm a bit concerned with the Titans, and I think that you're basically going to have to go fingers crossed that we're seeing Desi take he's taking a step back to take 2 steps forward. That's what I'm hoping is happening to the Titans. I've got the Dolphins this week. We're going to head to the break. After the break, we've got Raiders v Rabbitohs. Host comes into the back row. Oh, Raiders. They are also a very interesting team because they have somehow, some way, managed to find themselves in 10th position. And Fogarty has returned. And granted, for 80 minutes, they didn't play like a side that had Fogarty had returned. But I tell you what, for that first 20 minutes, we got a glimpse of a team that could be much better than what they have been the last few weeks with Fogarty leading them around the park. They currently sit 10th with 22 points. They are well within striking distance of the top 8, sorry. And Fogarty, the more games he gets under his belt, the more chance they have of making the 8. And they are another side. So we did some predictions at the start of the year, and the Raiders were my biggest slide side. I thought that they would struggle the most. I just felt they were in a rebuild phase, even though Ricky would never say that because he's too tough for his own good. But I think that, first of all, you have to give them so much credit. The fact that they're currently sitting 10th and they're also rebuilding with young guys coming through is amazing. And they're only going to be better for it next year. Strange is only going to be better for it next year. Guys like Chevy Stewart coming through reserve grade, better next year. Guys like guys like Sanders arriving from the Eels, only going to be better to the squad. Very exciting time for the Raiders. And if they make the 8, it is a miracle because at the start of the, well, from my opinion anyway, I think they've been amazing. They've been incredible. The Rabbitohs, I mean, it really is just one game at a time. You look at the Rabbitohs and they're currently sitting 12th. They're currently on 20 points. Who knows? Who knows? I mean, it's been so exciting to watch them play almost just carefree footy. And look, I think there's going to be a cracking clash. It's going to be a tough one as to who wins. I'm probably going to go to the Raiders just because it's at home, 6:15 on a Sunday night. Oh, she can get chilly. And so I think that the Raiders will get the job done. Just because last week with the Rabbitohs, I did feel definitely not a sense of, I didn't feel like they were, complacent at all. But I did kind of feel like they were playing the game where, look, we've got such a good side on paper when it comes to attack. We know we'll out-attack the Tigers. And so there would be periods where they would just kind of lull a bit in their defence. They would kind of just rely on the fact that they had good attack, whereas they can't do that against the Raiders because the Raiders have such a dominant forward pack. And so it's going to be interesting to see, because the Rabbitohs have been so good defensively for 4 or 5 weeks. Just a little hiccup last week, even though they got the job done, just defensively they were a bit low. Will they return to some good form with their defence? If so, maybe they will have enough strike power to beat the Raiders. But I think the Raiders build on last week. They got confidence from Fogarty back. and they get the job done on a Sunday afternoon. Now, that's us done and dusted for the day. Coming up, we've got the run home with Joel and Fletch from Elements Bar and Grill, Fletcher's Wacky Team Wednesday. Thank you all for listening. Thanks for all the texts. We've got so many texts we couldn't get them all. Here's a scoop. Trey Fuller has just signed for 2 years with the Dolphins. An incredible signing. Hasn't his story been amazing? Seriously, one of his strongest assets is his bravery for such a little fella. He goes so hard. An incredible athlete, an excitement machine. Congratulations to him.